Sexism in Netball by Lauren Graziani, Abby Dentino, and Jenna Anderson. So, what is netball? The International Olympic Committee recognized netball as a sport in 1995. There are about 1 million netball players nationwide in Australia, most of which are women. There are two teams with 7 players each. The objective of the game is to score a goal into a ring within a certain area. The ring is on a post about 10 feet high. In order to win, the team must score the most goals. Here is a clip of an example of what a netball game looks like. The key issues surrounding netball regard the uniform, gender discrimination, unequal pay and funding, and lesser media coverage. However, lately, netball is fighting sexism through equal pay, more coverage, and gaining sponsorships.
Every sport goes through a series of uniform changes and guidelines. Prior to the 1930s, netball uniforms consisted of blouses, tunics, and bloomers with sports shoes made of cheap leather. The uniforms weren't ideal for physical movement, and by the end of the 1960s, tunic sleeves and skirts shortened dramatically for comfort. This trend continued well into the 1970s and 1980s, where style of the decade impacted the looks of netball uniforms. Polo tops entered the scene in the 1970s as looser, more breathable uniforms were implemented in the 1980s. However, the most important shift in the evolution of the netball uniform is when the Australian National League initiated the bodysuit in the early 1990s. Today, a bodysuit made of breathable lycra material is recognized as the national standard for all league teams. However, over the past 2 decades, there has been controversy surrounding the look and material of netball uniforms. In 2007, the standard netball uniform was made shorter and tighter to allow for more movement and absorb excess body sweat. The change made a massive impact on netball participation among high schools, as 545,000 participating in the sport in 2004 dropped by more than 30,000 in the following year. Coaches argue that the shorter uniforms won't help Australia's obesity crisis, as they make overweight girls more self-conscious about their body image. Melbourne netball director Claire Heasley even stated that she doesn't own anything in her wardrobe that is shorter than a netball dress. The decrease in high school participation in the sport called for Netball Australia to rethink the design. However, little to no change was made. In February of last year, Brisbane netball player Rachel Brown was criticized by an umpire for her skirt being too short. Brown rebutted that this comment was only made because she was an overweight player compared to her teammates. The incident led to the CEO of Netball Queensland to call for a discussion about sports and body image. In addition, there are pros and cons to the design of the uniform. Some positive attributes are that the uniform's breathable lycra material, making exercise more comfortable and so that sweat doesn't weigh down the players' uniforms. The bodysuits are loose enough for players to move their legs quickly and allow for free movement. However, this doesn't necessarily mean that they are loose for every player. The tight design makes players with shapely body types more self-conscious about their bodies, as well as the short skirt length. The short skirts also pose as sexualization, considering that the dresses, if truly designed for comfort and movement, are not implemented in men's sports.
Both female and male gender discrimination is a prominent issue in the game of netball, even from the beginning of its name. Before 1901, netball was known just as women's basketball. In 1927, the All-Australian Women's Basketball Association was formed, and in 1970, the name of the game was changed to netball, and the word women's was deleted. which resulted in a change of the name from the All-Australian Women's Basketball Association to the All-Australian Netball Association. Then the All-Australian Netball Association changed its name to just Netball Australia in 1993. Despite these progressive name changes, gender discrimination still runs rampant within the sport. One reporter's opinion says that the game regards women as fragile ornaments who can't quite mix it in the hurly-burly world of men. Many believe that in order to relieve the gender discrimination, the way netball is referred to and described needs to be changed. Promoting netball as a non-contact sport diminishes the integrity and the validity of the sport. It also reinforces myths about the shortcomings of women and further discriminates against women as a result. Girls and women are not given the opportunity to use their full bodily capacities in the free and open engagement with the world, nor are they encouraged as much as boys are to develop specific bodily skills. This is supported through the restrictiveness of women's dress in the early stages of the development of netball as a sport, which we talked about earlier. In the rulebook, Rule 4, which covers the team, Rule 4.1 states, the game is for single-sex competition. Only women's netball is officially acknowledged through the International Federation of Netball Associations. Although some mixed-gendered competitions do exist in Australia, there are still lots of restrictions on how many boys are allowed on the court at once. A minimum of 3 females and a maximum of 3 males. Males are required to be divided evenly across the 3/3 of the court.
One of the big issues with netball is unequal pay and funding. The average pay for a netball player is $40,000. Looking at a male football player in the A-League in Australia, their average pay is $120,000. Netball players often have to work 2 jobs to afford the cost of living. The 12 best players on the Diamonds are not funded as well as 700 AFL players. The sport is not well funded either. For example, in South Australia from the years 2006 to 2016, the state government only spent $6.5 million on netball in total. Meanwhile, the state spent $535 million on the Adelaide Oval alone, which is used for football and cricket, which is mostly a male sport. The Australian Sports Commission did a study on female sports and media coverage. This revealed that only 7% of television sport coverage goes to women's sports. To compare, horse racing has more television coverage than women's sports does. This has been a decline from 11% of coverage of women's sports 10 years ago. ABC took budget cuts recently and no longer broadcasts some of the main women's sports on TV. Netball struggles because they have to produce their own broadcast. Also, netball has a lack of sponsorship, which makes it difficult to build the strong image the sport needs. Recently, netball is fighting sexism and making improvements. There was a new agreement set in place where 80 netball athletes share a $5.4 million payment pool. There will be an increase in average salary to $67,000 because of this. Despite the overall lack of women's sport on television, netball continues to have success. This is only because Netball Australia is paying broadcasters to air the sport on TV. For example, all 72 matches of the 2015 ANZ Championship aired on Fox Sports. Channel 10 now live streams 1 game a week as well. Although this is still not as much as most male sports, it is an improvement and is going in the right direction. Netball is also working to gain new sponsors. Recently, Netball South Australia acquired Priceline as a major sponsor. This has become beneficial to netball in getting big brands behind the sport.
In conclusion, sexism in netball is forever changing as we enter a more diverse and socially liberal era. Controversy in sports and sexism does not only concern female-dominated sports, but also sports culture as young men are told to man up and be masculine in their physical pursuits. As a result, young men are discouraged from playing sports like netball on high school co-ed teams because they were raised to believe that this is strictly a women's sport. The future of netball, abolishing sexism, is in the hands of both the players and the fans, and we hope to see an improvement in sports equality for both men and women in netball.